The hidden rise. The galaxy had always thought of humans as nothing more than background noise, another small voice in the endless crowd of species. For centuries, the great outsider races ignored Earth. They believed humans were fragile, too emotional, too young to ever be a true power. When humans asked for trade, they were mocked. When they asked for seats in councils, they were laughed at. When they warned of danger, they were silenced. To most of the galaxy, humanity was harmless, weak, a race that survived only by staying quiet. But while the galaxy laughed, Earth worked in silence. Behind their borders, hidden from the eyes of spies, humanity was building not just colonies, not just fleets, but something greater, an empire of their own. It began small, factories buried under the crust of Mars, shipyards hidden in the shadows of Saturn's rings, research stations orbiting black holes where no outsider dared to travel. Piece by piece, brick by brick, humans created what no one expected. They were not asking for a place in the galaxy anymore, they were taking it. The first signs came quietly, almost like rumors. A trader spoke of a star system that had gone silent. No signals, no messages, nothing. Another swore he had seen strange vessels at the edge of the Orion Spur, ships with black hulls and silent engines, moving without sound. But when asked for proof, none could provide it. And the galaxy only laughed. Harder. Humans building warships? Impossible, they said. Then one day a wreck was found. It was drifting at the edge of outsider space, a battleship belonging to the Ral Dominion. Its hull burned, its engines dead, its crew gone. The wounds on the ship were not made by any known weapon, not plasma, not lasers, not railguns. They were something new, something sharper, cleaner, terrifying in its precision. The story spread fast, but the Dominion dismissed it. Pirates, they said. Or maybe an accident. But in their hearts, unease began to grow. On Earth, leaders watched in silence, their plans moving forward. The United Terran Command was no longer a council of weak voices begging for help. It had become a war council. Every colony had a role. Every scientist had a task. Every worker had a duty. No resources were wasted. No time was lost. Humanity worked with a single purpose. They remembered their history. They remembered the centuries when others ruled over them. Never again would humans beg. Never again would they be laughed at. Deep under the ice of Europa, secret hangars opened, revealing ships the size of cities. In the asteroid belt, mining stations no longer mined for profit, but for war, pulling out rare metals for weapons and engines. On Titan, giant reactors burned day and night, feeding energy into hidden shipyards where dreadnoughts slowly took shape. And far beyond, in the cold silence near dead stars, human fleets trained in shadows, their movements never recorded, their weapons never revealed. Yet, not all secrets could stay hidden. Outsider spies tried to enter human space, some dressed as traders, some disguised as workers, most never returned, their signals vanishing in the void. But a few made it back carrying fragments of what they had seen, colossal shipyards, massive fleets, strange new weapons. They brought warnings to their councils. But the leaders only laughed. The humans are children, they said. They play with toys, they do not build empires. Still, the whispers grew louder. Some claimed humanity had discovered ancient technology. Others swore they had allied with unknown races. But the truth was simpler and far more dangerous. Humans had only themselves, and that was enough. No one knew their numbers, no one knew their strength, and no one dared to cross into their space. Then came the day the first dreadnought launched. It rose from the shadows of Saturn, its black hull swallowing the light, its engines humming with energy the galaxy had never seen. Crewmen stood in silence as the ship stretched across the void, longer than any outsider vessel, armed with weapons no one had names for. The ship carried a name burned into its side, Eternal Resolve. It was more than a warship. It was a warning. From that moment, humanity was no longer hidden, no longer silent. Though the galaxy did not yet see the full picture, the first tremor had been felt. Whispers turned to fear. Fear turned to rumors. Rumors turned to panic. Something was rising in the dark, something the galaxy had laughed at for too long. The humans were not weak. They were waiting, not begging for a place in the galaxy but preparing to take one. An empire had been built in silence, and soon, the outsiders would learn the truth, that the hidden rise of humanity was only the beginning, whispers of power. The galaxy thought humans were only pretending. Many still believed the first dreadnought was a trick. Some said it was hollow, just a shell to scare fools. Others whispered that the humans had bought it from another species, that they could never build something so advanced on their own. But deep down, unease began to spread, for too many strange things were happening, and the answers always pointed toward human space. Spies moved quietly, slipping past trade lanes, searching for truth. One spy, a veteran from the Dominion, entered, a human colony disguised as a trader. He expected a small outpost, poor and weak. Instead, he found a city glowing with power, factories burning day and night, workers moving in perfect order, soldiers training with weapons he had never seen before. Every street was busy, every building alive with purpose. It was not the life of a weak race. It was the heartbeat of an empire. He tried to send a message back, but the signal never reached. His ship vanished on the edge of human space. The Dominion never saw him again. Others tried too, and some escaped, but they returned with broken words, half-mad whispers about fleets the size of stars, about black ships with silent engines that appeared from nowhere and disappeared without a trace. No one could prove it, yet fear grew stronger. Rumors spread in every council chamber. Humans have hidden shipyards, one voice said. They are building weapons not of this galaxy, another claimed. A few even dared to whisper. Perhaps the humans found something ancient, something left behind by forgotten gods. The galaxy laughed at these words in public, but in private, leaders could not sleep. For trade routes had grown dangerous near human borders. Ships had vanished, and the wrecks, when found, bore wounds from weapons no one could explain. On Earth, the leaders of the United Terran Command listened in silence. They knew the galaxy was whispering, but they did not care, for their work was not yet finished. Factories on Mars continued to roar, rings of Saturn lit up with secret docks, Europa's ice cracked open to release yet another warship. Humanity was not slowing down, they were moving faster. Every colony had become a forge, every worker a builder of war. Children grew up not with songs of peace, but with oaths of duty. They were the builders of a hidden empire, and they knew the day of war would come. Still, the galaxy refused to believe. The outsider council gathered, mighty and proud. They mocked the rumors, called them childish stories. One elder laughed. Humans cannot even live on a death world without crying for help. How could they build fleets greater than ours? But his laughter was thin. His hands trembled. For he had seen the reports of burned ships, of dead fleets at the border. He knew the whispers were not empty. One day, a small cargo vessel from the Yathari Confederacy slipped too close to human territory. They thought it would be safe, for the humans were too weak to attack, but as they drifted near a quiet star, black shadows rose from the dark. 5 human ships appeared without warning, engines silent, hulls glowing faintly. The Yathari crew froze, their ship trembling as the human fleet surrounded them. A single human voice came over the comms, calm and cold. You do not belong here. Leave, tell your masters, we are not blind, we are not weak, we are watching. The cargo vessel limped away, and when it returned, the crew could barely speak. Their eyes carried terror. Their voices shook, and the whispers became louder. Soon, no trader dared to cross into human space without fear. No spy dared to stay. Too long, every disappearance, every lost ship, every silent wreck was blamed on humanity. The galaxy's mighty empires argued. Some wanted to crush humans quickly before they grew stronger. Others warned, what if they are already too strong? What if the whispers are true? And still humanity stayed silent. They did not explain, they did not defend, they did not beg. Their silence was louder than any threat. for the galaxy had always known what noise meant. It meant weakness, desperation, fear, but silence. Silence meant confidence. Silence meant certainty. Silence meant power. On the colonies, young human officers trained with steel in their eyes. They knew war was coming. They could feel it in the way their leaders spoke. The soldiers whispered to one another. The galaxy thinks we are small, but they will see soon enough. And in the shadows of the shipyards, new vessels rose, bigger, deadlier, hungrier for battle. The outsiders sent another spy, a skilled one, clever and cautious. He slipped past the borders, hid in the asteroids, and finally saw with his own eyes a fleet gathering near a dying star. Dozens of black ships lined in perfect formation, engines glowing faintly, weapons pointed toward the void. The spy's heart froze, for he knew this was no rumor. This was no lie. The whispers were true, but before he could escape, before he could deliver the truth, a shadow fell over his small vessel. A single human dreadnought appeared, and then his ship was gone, swallowed by silence. The whispers of power grew louder, and though the galaxy still laughed in daylight at night, even the strongest rulers lay awake, for they all feared the same thing. That humanity had built not just ships, not just armies, but an empire in the dark, an empire that no one had seen coming, and an empire that was almost ready to strike. First encounter. The outsiders grew tired of whispers. They had heard enough rumors of human power, enough tales of black warships and silent fleets. They decided it was time to test humanity with their own eyes. And so, a fleet was sent. Not small, not weak, but strong enough to crush what they believed were lies. 20 outsider warships crossed the border of human space. Each vessel carried weapons that had ruled the stars for centuries. Their commanders laughed as they prepared to meet the humans. "This will be quick," one said. "The galaxy will see that humans are only dreamers, not warriors." But deep inside, a seed of doubt remained, for no one knew what waited for them in the shadows of human space. At first the journey was quiet. The outsiders expected resistance, patrols, or warnings. But there was nothing, only silence. Their ships drifted deeper, scanning empty stars. Then suddenly, the lead vessel detected something, a faint signal, cold and strange. It was a human transmission, short and sharp. "Turn back." The commanders laughed. "We will not turn back for children," they said, and they pressed forward, their fleet cutting through the void. But then the stars themselves seemed to move. Shadows appeared, large and countless, breaking free from the darkness. Human warships, black as night, surrounded the outsiders without a sound. The alien fleet froze. Their scanners lit up with warnings. 10, 20, 30 human ships now closing in. The outsiders had entered a trap. For every warship they brought, the humans had 2 waiting. And yet, the strangest part was not the numbers, but the silence. Human ships gave no war cries, no boasts, no demands. They simply waited, weapons glowing faintly, their presence heavy like the weight of a storm. The outsider commander tried to speak. "This is Dominion Fleet 17, we demand you step aside." But no human voice answered, only silence. The outsider ships grew nervous, their hands tight on their weapons. And then, without warning, a single human dreadnought moved forward. It was enormous, larger than anything they had ever seen, its hull shining with an energy they could not understand. On its side was painted a name, Eternal Resolve. The dreadnought locked its weapons. In that moment, the outsider fleet realized the truth. They were not hunters, they were prey. The first shot came sharp and merciless. A beam of light cut across the void, striking the lead outsider vessel. Its shields collapsed in seconds, its armor ripped apart. The ship exploded, and silence returned. The rest of the outsider fleet panicked. They fired back, plasma bolts and missiles filling the space. But the human ships moved with impossible speed, dodging, weaving, striking back with weapons unknown. Every shot from the humans was precise, every strike deadly. It was as if they had studied the outsiders for centuries, knowing exactly where to hit. One by one, outsider ships were torn apart, their proud fleet reduced to wreckage. The commander screamed for retreat, But it was too late. The humans were everywhere. Outsider ships turned to flee, but human vessels blocked every path. Then, just as quickly as the battle began, it ended. The stars grew quiet, and wrecks floated lifeless in the void. Out of 20 ships, only one survived, allowed to limp away. Its captain trembling, its crew broken, that lone survivor carried a message to the galaxy. The humans had not only defended their space, they had crushed a fleet that should have overwhelmed them, and they had done it with silence, with precision, with terrifying ease. When the survivor spoke before the Outsider Council, his voice shook. "They are not weak," he said. "They are not small. They are death itself, wrapped in steel." The council tried to dismiss his words, but fear spread faster than their denials. Whispers turned to screams. Traitors abandoned routes near human space. Colonies closed their gates. Rulers locked themselves in debate. The galaxy had never seen such a thing. A young race destroying an ancient fleet in their first encounter. Back on Earth, the leaders of the United Terran Command watched in silence, their faces calm, their eyes sharp. The plan had worked. The message was sent. The galaxy now knew that humanity was no longer in the shadows. Their first encounter with war was a warning, and the outsiders had learned it in blood, yet even then, humanity did not celebrate. There were no cheers, no songs, only work, only silence, for they knew this was only the beginning. The outsiders would not stop, the galaxy would not forgive. The first encounter had ended in human victory, but the war that followed would test everything. The wrecks drifted at the border of human space, silent graves for those who underestimated them, and every drifting corpse carried a message. Humanity was not weak, not prey, not background noise. They were builders of an empire unseen. And now, with their first encounter, they had announced it to the stars. The declaration: the galaxy could no longer laugh. The outsiders had sent 20 warships and 19 never came back. What was supposed to be a lesson for humans had turned into a graveyard. The wrecks floated as silent proof that humanity was not weak. No council, no empire. No ruler could ignore it anymore. The survivors spoke with trembling voices. They told of black dreadnoughts larger than cities, of weapons that cut through shields like paper. They told of silence, how the humans gave no threats, no warnings, only destruction. Every word spread, like wildfire. On distant worlds, children whispered of the Deathworlders. On trading routes, merchants changed course to avoid human borders. Even smugglers, the bravest of the reckless, swore never to go near Earth again. Still, the outsiders were proud. The High Council of the Dominion gathered in their shining halls. Their voices roared in anger. Their pride burned hotter than their fear. "They are still just a young race," one shouted. "They tricked us with hidden weapons, but they cannot stand against the full might of the galaxy." Others agreed, calling for war, calling for humans to be crushed before they grew stronger. But not all voices shouted. Some were quiet, cautious, warning the council. What if this was not their full strength? What if this was only a glimpse? Yet those words were drowned out by pride. The great empires had ruled for centuries, and they would not bow to newcomers. The decision was made. Humans must be shown their place. The galaxy would unite to put them down. On Earth, the leaders of the United Terran Command expected this. They had built their empire in silence, knowing this day would come. The first encounter was not just a victory, it was a signal. Now the time had come to speak, not in whispers, but in a voice the whole galaxy would hear. A broadcast was prepared. From Earth to the furthest colonies, every human world linked together, and when it was ready, they opened the channels. Not only to their people, but to every empire, every council, every ruler. The galaxy froze as human voices filled the stars. The message was simple, cold, and clear. We are not weak. We are not blind. We will defend our people. If you cross into our space again, you will find only war. We do not seek your thrones. We do not seek your tribute, but we will not kneel. From this day, humanity stands as one empire. Remember our words. Remember our silence. We are watching. The declaration shook the stars. Never before had a young race spoken to the galaxy like this. Never before had a people ignored the power of the old empires and dared to stand alone. Some rulers laughed in public, calling it arrogance. But in the darkness of their halls they trembled, for they had seen what silence could do on human colonies. The people stood taller. For centuries they had lived as the lesser race, the weaklings of Earth. Now they had a banner, now they had an empire. Children in mining stations lifted their heads proudly. Soldiers on the front lines clenched their fists. Every human heart burned with the same fire. They were no longer asking to belong, they were declaring their place. The outsiders did not remain silent. In their own councils, their voices shook the walls. "We will not bow to humans," they cried. "They have forgotten their place. And we will remind them." Fleets began to gather, armies began to march. The galaxy prepared for war, for pride is louder than fear, and the old rulers could not accept the rise of a new empire. Yet in the shadows some species watched with curiosity. Some whispered, "Perhaps we should ally with them." Others thought of rebellion, of throwing off the chains of the great empires and standing beside humanity. The declaration was more than words. It was a spark, and sparks, once lit, cannot be controlled. Back on Earth, the commanders remained silent after the broadcast. They did not cheer, they did not celebrate. They knew the truth, the outsiders would not listen. War was coming faster than ever, but they were ready, for they had built their strength in darkness, and now the light of war would show the galaxy everything. The people of Earth whispered one sentence again and again: "We are not prey, we are not weak, we are human." And as fleets gathered in the distance and old empires sharpened their weapons, the declaration hung in the stars like a blade, the first words of a new empire. And the outsiders, no matter how strong they thought they were, could not erase. The humans had declared their place in the galaxy, and from this day forward nothing would ever be the same. The war begins. The galaxy could not ignore the declaration. Humanity had spoken with a voice of iron, and the words spread across the stars like fire. The outsiders called it arrogance, they called it madness, they called it a challenge, and no empire built on centuries of power could allow such defiance to go unanswered. The Dominion was the first to move. Their pride burned hotter than their fear. They assembled a fleet greater than any sent before, hundreds of ships armed with the best weapons of their empire. The commanders smiled with cruel confidence. This time, they said, the humans will learn what it means to face real power, but humanity was already waiting. The United Terran Command had seen the signs. Scouts reported outsider fleets gathering, supply routes shifting, soldiers preparing. The first war of humanity's empire had arrived, and every colony, every soldier, every ship was ready. The battle came at the border of human space, near a quiet red star. The Dominion thought it would be simple. They would crush the humans in one strike, destroy their fleets, burn their colonies, and erase their pride. But when they arrived, they did not find fear. They found a wall of steel and fire. Human fleets rose from the shadows, dreadnoughts black as night, destroyers sharp as blades, carriers releasing swarms of drones. Their formations were perfect, their silence heavy. The Dominion laughed at first, for they still believed numbers would win. But when the first shot was fired, laughter died. The humans struck with terrifying precision. Railguns that pierced shields, plasma storms that burned through armor, drones that swarmed like locusts. Every Dominion ship that moved forward was torn apart. The void filled with wreckage, and the red star burned brighter with fire. Yet the Dominion pressed on. They outnumbered the humans. They had more ships, more soldiers. Wave after wave crashed against the human fleets. But the humans did not break. Their dreadnoughts fought like beasts. Their smaller ships darted like hunters. Every strike was calculated, every loss repaid in blood. On Earth, the people watched the battle through trembling broadcasts. They saw their sons and daughters fighting. In the cold void, they saw human ships stand against impossible odds. Fear filled their hearts, but so did pride. For the first time in history, humanity was not defending in weakness. They were standing as warriors, as an empire. The Dominion commanders grew desperate. They had expected an easy victory, but the battle dragged on. Every moment more of their ships fell. Still, they refused to retreat. Pride would not allow it. And so the battle turned into slaughter. Hours passed, and the void became a graveyard. Human ships burned too, torn by plasma fire, shattered by missiles. Thousands of human lives were lost. But they did not retreat. They did not surrender. Every soldier fought to the last breath, for they knew this was not just a battle. It was the first war for survival. At last, the Dominion fleet began to falter. Their numbers were still greater, but their spirit was broken. They had expected weaklings, but found predators, their commanders argued, some demanding retreat, others shouting for one last push. But the humans gave them no time. With one final strike, the dreadnought, Eternal Resolve, cut through the Dominion flagship. The great vessel that had led the invasion split apart, fire spilling into the void. The Dominion fleet scattered, fleeing into the stars. The first great battle of the war was over. The humans stood bloodied but unbroken. The wreckage of Dominion, ships drifted across the border, silent proof of human strength. The galaxy watched in shock. A young race, once mocked as weak, had stood against one of the greatest empires and survived. But humanity did not celebrate. There were no parades, no songs. The dead were too many, the cost too high. Mothers wept for lost sons, fathers buried daughters. Children asked why their parents would never return. The war had begun, and humanity knew this was only the first battle. Greater storms were coming, greater enemies would rise. Still, something had changed. In every colony, in every heart, the fire burned brighter. The whispers of weakness were gone, replaced by a single truth. Humanity was strong. Strong enough to fight, strong enough to survive, strong enough to build an empire. The outsiders saw it too. Fear spread through their councils, but so did rage. They could not allow humans to rise, they could not allow this defiance to continue, so they called for allies, gathering fleets from other empires. The galaxy itself was preparing to unite against one enemy, Earth. And as human soldiers repaired their ships, as families buried their dead, they knew the war had only just begun. The first battle was a warning. The next would decide the fate of entire worlds, and in the silence of the void the humans whispered to themselves, "We will not break, we will not bow. We are ready." The turning tide. The first great battle was over. The humans had stood against the Dominion fleet and forced them to retreat. But the victory came with heavy cost. Human ships drifted as burning wrecks. Soldiers were lost. Families wept across the colonies. It was not a time for celebration. It was a time for preparation. The Dominion did not accept defeat. They were old, proud, and angry. They called upon allies, promising riches, promising revenge. Soon, fleets from 3 different empires gathered together. It was the largest force humanity had ever faced, and their goal was simple: to crush the human empire before it could grow stronger. The galaxy watched in silence. Would humanity finally fall? Would the upstarts, who dared to declare an empire, now be broken? No one knew, but all eyes were fixed on the edge of human space. The war was far from over, and the next strike would decide everything. On Earth, the leaders of the United Terran Command met in their war halls. Their maps glowed with red markers, showing fleets converging. The room was heavy with silence, but there was no fear, only determination. Humanity had always survived by adapting, by turning weakness into strength. Now, they would do the same against the greatest fleets the galaxy could send. Scientists worked day and night. New weapons were forged, new shields tested, new tactics written. Engineers unleashed swarms of drones, faster and smarter than before. Railguns grew sharper, plasma storms more deadly. Even the smallest ships were upgraded, made to fight like predators in the void. The colonies gave everything. Children collected scraps for war, workers built ships without rest, farmers shared food freely, miners dug deeper. No one asked for reward, no one demanded payment. Every human heart knew the truth. If they lost this war, there would be no future. Then the second great battle came, at the border of Vega, where human colonies stood close to the outsiders. The allied fleets of the Dominion, the Kayal and the Yathari entered, hundreds of warships, a storm of power. They laughed as they advanced, believing numbers would crush humanity once and for all. But the humans were ready. Their fleets rose from the shadows, fewer in number but stronger in will. The dreadnought Eternal Resolve led the charge, its black hull glowing like a star of death. Behind it came carriers releasing thousands of drones, destroyers darting like wolves. The void lit up with fire, and the battle began. At first, the outsiders pushed hard. Their fleets swarmed, their weapons rained destruction. Human ships burned, colonies shook in fear. It seemed the galaxy's might was too much. The Allied commanders shouted with pride, "They cannot hold. They will break." But the humans did not break. They adapted. Every time a new weapon struck them, they learned. Every time a ship was lost, they changed formation. Their drones swarmed in strange patterns, confusing enemy targeting. Their railguns struck weak points with precision. Their plasma storms spread wider than ever, burning entire squadrons at once. Hours passed and slowly, the tide began to turn. The outsiders had expected a desperate defense, but what they found was strategy sharper than blades. The humans fought, as if they had seen the future. As if every move of the enemy had already been written. In the middle of the chaos, the Dominion flagship tried to push forward. Its weapons blazed, its shields roared, but the humans swarmed it with drones, tearing its defenses apart piece by piece. Then the Eternal Resolve struck. One beam of energy, pure and deadly, sliced the flagship in half. The proud vessel shattered, and with it, Dominion morale broke. The Kal and Yathari tried to rally. They shouted for their fleets to fight on. But fear had spread faster than orders. Ships began to fall back, formations shattered, and in that moment, the humans pressed. Harder, they were no longer defending, they were hunting. The galaxy watched in shock. The second great battle ended the same way as the first, not with human defeat but with human victory. The outsiders had gathered more power, more ships, more allies, yet they still could not break the humans. Instead, they were the ones broken, their fleets fleeing into the dark, but this time the galaxy noticed something new. Humanity had not just survived, they had grown stronger. Every battle made them faster, every loss made them sharper. They were adapting at a speed no old empire could match. What others took centuries to learn, humans mastered in days. Fear spread wider than ever. The whispers grew louder. If this is how strong they are now, what will they become tomorrow? Some rulers panicked, some called for peace, some demanded more war. But all agreed on one thing. Humanity was no longer a small voice. They were the storm rising in silence. On Earth, the people buried their dead. They mourned, but they did not despair. For every grave became a vow, a promise that the human empire would not fall, not to pride, not to fear, not to numbers. The turning tide had come, and humanity was riding it forward. The war was far from over. The outsiders would return, stronger and angrier than before. But humanity had shown the galaxy one truth. They could not be underestimated, they could not be silenced, and with every battle, they were only becoming more dangerous. The turning tide had begun, and the galaxy would soon learn what it meant to face the Empire. No one had seen coming, the Empire revealed. The tide had turned. Twice the galaxy had sent fleets to crush the humans. Twice those fleets had been shattered, left burning in the cold silence of space. Whispers had become fear. Fear had become panic. And now, the galaxy understood. Humanity was no longer hiding. Across the stars, rulers met in secret chambers. Some shouted for more war, their pride refusing to bend. Others begged for peace, whispering that fighting humans was madness. But one truth stood above all. No one could ignore Earth anymore. A race once dismissed as fragile had risen, and their empire was no longer a rumor. It was real. In the ruins of the last battle, human ships gathered, dreadnoughts black as night, destroyers sharp as blades, carriers heavy with swarms of drones. They moved not like survivors but like conquerors. The galaxy waited to see what they would do next. Would they stay behind their borders, or would they strike? The answer came sooner than anyone expected. Human fleets crossed into outsider space, not with small raids, not with quiet scouts, but with full strength. They entered the territory of the Dominion itself. The proud empire that had once mocked them now trembled. For human warships appeared in their skies, their black hulls blotting out the stars, on the capital world of the Dominion. Panic spread, alarms rang, civilians fled, soldiers rushed to their posts. But when they looked up, they saw dreadnoughts so large that even their strongest defenses seemed useless. And leading them all was the eternal resolve, glowing like a blade forged from the void itself. The humans did not begin with fire. Instead, they sent a message, broadcast to every corner of the Dominion. We gave you a warning. You ignored it. We defended and we survived. Now we show you the truth. Humanity is not prey. Humanity is not weak. We are an empire. You will not take from us again. The words echoed across the stars. Every world, every colony, every council heard them. And with those words, humanity revealed what they had built in silence. Not just fleets, not just weapons, but unity. For the first time in history, every human stood as one people, one empire. Then the strike began. Human fleets targeted military stations, weapons depots, command centers. Every attack was precise, clean, without mercy. The Dominion's defenses crumbled in hours, their fleets scattered like dust in the wind. The galaxy watched in disbelief. As an ancient empire, powerful for centuries, was broken in days by the hands of humans. But humanity did not stop there. They pushed deeper, taking system after system. Worlds that had once bowed to the Dominion now surrendered to humanity without a fight. Some even welcomed them. For the humans came not as slavers or tyrants, but as liberators. They destroyed the chains of the Dominion and left freedom behind. This was not just war. It was transformation. Across the galaxy, voices rose. The weak cheered. The strong trembled. Some races begged to join the human empire, offering loyalty in exchange for protection. Others swore revenge, sharpening their blades in secret. But no one could deny the truth anymore. The empire no one had seen coming was now revealed. Standing, tall and unshakable. On Earth, the people wept and celebrated. For every death there had been sacrifice, for every battle there had been pain. But now the reward was clear. Humanity was no longer ignored. Children grew up hearing stories of human ships defeating ancient fleets. Workers lifted their heads higher. Soldiers walked with pride. They had taken their place in the stars, and no one could take it away. The leaders of the United Terran Command stood before their people, their voices calm, their eyes burning with resolve. We built in silence. We endured their laughter. We survived their wars. And now we rise. The outsiders thought us weak, but weakness was only our disguise. Today we reveal what we are. We are humanity, and we are forever. The galaxy trembled at those words, for they knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning. The war with the outsiders would continue. New enemies would rise. Old empires would resist. But humanity had proven they could not be broken, and every battle would only make them stronger. The stars themselves seemed to whisper, "An empire has been born. An empire of humans. An empire that no one saw coming." And somewhere in the dark, far beyond the edges of known space, other eyes were watching. Eyes older than the empires, older than the wars. They too had heard the declaration. They too had seen the rise. And they whispered to themselves, "If this is what humanity is now, what will they become tomorrow?" The galaxy had changed forever. The outsiders had learned the price of pride. And the humans, once dismissed as weak, had revealed their true face. The empire was here, and the war, with the outsiders, was only the first chapter of their story.